Hello, friends. Today we have with us a very special guest, Ms. Anu Acharya. She is a biotechnologist and a serial entrepreneur. She was awarded as Young Global Leader by World Economic Forum in 2011. Currently, she is heading a very unique startup, Map My Genome, in biotech area or genomics area. I'm really a big fan of her work. So, Anu, thanks for sparing time. Welcome to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Abhay.
So, Anu, currently this COVID crisis is affecting different industries in a different way. You know, it has negatively affected aviation industry and event management industry and so on. So, how this COVID crisis is affecting biotech or genomic industry?
So I think it is in a sense a great opportunity for life sciences industries to become the savior for this world. For many years, I think life an aiding sort of industry. It was considered to be the sunrise industry where it was taking a long time for the sun to rise. I think in some ways we have sort of come to a point where we realize the value of biotech and the value of biotech not just in the sense of being a business, but biotech as in an industry that actually can help in saving lives and many other things. So I think this is a great opportunity for us, especially in India, to build. Given that a lot of the supply chains have closed down, we are no longer able to just source the cheapest from the world. And I think this is the time where every country is looking to build that capability. And I think in India, this will be a great opportunity to build capabilities in genomics, capabilities in diagnostics, manufacturing, as well as in vaccine, not just manufacturing, but also in actually coming up with newer vaccines. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Yes, there are obviously a lot of short-term challenges that all of us are facing, and just like every other industry, I think many of us do have that challenge also. Even we have that because you can't ship out samples and all that. But at the same time, I think this will be something at least for Map My Genome. In many ways, we have always been talking about why prevention is a cure rather than waiting for a cure. In many ways, we're seeing that when you look at the impact of COVID, we find that if you have a strong immune system, that you are able to manage that much better than otherwise. So in many ways, it justifies what we do at the core of what we do at Map My Genome. But it's also a great time, I think, what the COVID crisis has done is to also enable a lot of collaborations that earlier were sort of not happening for multiple reasons, right? And so, for instance, I think I've been working with both academia as well as governments in a very collaborative and a very, it's a very nice learning experience for everybody. So you work with people, it sort of helps in building and adding perspectives from different parts. And it's not just about competing for something, but it's about being able to find a solution. So for instance, I think coming up with how do we test effectively? Right?
So you today wrote an article also in Economic Times about how one should. So would you like to elaborate on that?
Certainly. So I think this was an example of where I've been working with two professors, one from University of Chicago, Anup Malani, as well as Manoj Mohanan from Duke. And what we've been doing is to be able to help and advising some of the state governments in using using their resources effectively to understand how to test their population, but also to be able to find out how they can actually effectively come out of these lockdowns without having to, spend too much money, but being able to come out, because ultimately it's a fine balance between managing the economy as well as keeping it under lockdown, right? So there's a value in lockdown, but there is also you don't want people to die of hunger versus not being affected by the virus. So I think it is very imperative to be able to come up with an effective strategy. So the way we came out with this was to be able to say, can we put together not just the confirmatory tests like RT-PCR, but to be able to pull in other forms of testing, because some tests provide different kinds of information as opposed to the others, and put all of that together to create the most effective way of sampling. And we not just do it as randomly, but to do it in a way that statistically makes sense, that you can combine it with a very smart sampling method that you use, and you're able to combine that. So I think that's the sort of advice that you can give to people to be able to do that. Now, I think in the past, having run two businesses for the last 20 years, I don't think that was necessarily, the topmost thing on my mind. I think you're constantly thinking about, there are things about how to come up with new products and revenues and various other things. But now I think it is great because you can use some of that knowledge, but also get perspectives from people that you never could before. And you start to understand challenges, you start to understand constraints from different parts of the ecosystem. And I think if we can all start to understand a little bit for each other's problems, I think we might be able to solve and create a better world is what I think.
Anu, you, as you rightly said, you have already done two businesses. You started your first business in 2000 when I think you were 27, 28 years old. And then you actually end up becoming serial entrepreneur. So, but when you started your first business, there was no buzz of startup at that time. Currently, there is a lot of buzz around startups and large number of youngsters are moving in doing their startups. So do you feel that, or do you see any change in the culture, in ease of doing business? So if you compare 2000 and current situation?
So yes, absolutely. I think there is a difference. I think a lot more people understand what a startup means. I think it's also far easier to access capital. But at the same time, I think when you consider an entrepreneur, I think an entrepreneur is someone who goes against, what is expected of them. And I think therefore, by definition, I think, starting in 2000 was something that you instinctively we did as something that was what you strongly believe in, right? So I think that part of what we believe strongly in, I think that part of entrepreneurship was always there. But I think now it helps tremendously because your ecosystem has developed much better than it was in 2000. So for instance, I think today if you want to look for advisors, if you want to look for mentors, or you want to look for some information, you'll be able to get that anywhere. You can, I think most of us are parts of several WhatsApp groups that if you're looking for something, you're looking for someone in terms of whether it is HR advice, whether it's in terms of any other thing, the possibility of reaching someone and getting that information is so much faster as opposed to earlier. The other thing also is that in the last 20 years, I think a lot of successful entrepreneurs are giving back to the society in many ways. And they have become the VCs. And I think that has changed a lot, especially on the angel investing front. I think India still has a way off to go because as we develop this, I think there needs to be, the ecosystem needs to be not so, needs to have the right motivations to be able to do that, both from people who invest in such startups, but second also in terms of the startups that want to make sure that they can make an impact. So I think that has to change.
But Anu, if you really look at investments which are currently happening, the major unicorn investments which are happening here are in e-commerce businesses or logistics kind of companies. Are really investors ready to invest in something like biotech, genomics, where the cycle is really big, investment cycle?
I think now they will start doing that. I think people have started to understand the value of it. But you're right. I think that has been a big challenge in what we saw in the past, because it was always easier to invest in something that people could sort of understand. And genomics was something that most people had a hard time understanding. I remember in 2005-06, when we were doing our first round of investment, we had to go through rounds of explaining what is a DNA and an RNA. I think today almost everybody, thanks to COVID, knows what RT-PCR is. People know what, everybody is a scientist. So I think it has raised the level of understanding by many folds. So I think it's a good time. People understand the challenges. I think it is, they also understand the importance. And we realize, for instance, that a lot of times the reason why somebody like the US is able to come up with quicker cures or something is because they had investments in those areas without necessarily having a crisis. And I think that's why we need to make sure that this can be a good reminder for all of us to be able to say that we need to develop this, and this is not just an industry that you look at it from a revenue perspective, but it's also an industry that you cannot do without, right? And I think that will sort of spur a lot of not just investments in it, but also will spur a lot of innovations. I think we started seeing that already. We saw that a lot of people were coming in, and everybody had ideas on how to make a ventilator, how to make a mask, how to do everything else. But the challenge, of course, is that healthcare is not as simple, right? You can't just, in a month, come up with everything. You might come up with some good guidelines or good ideas, but I think to make it successful needs a lot of time and energy, and because you are impacting human life. So I think that's a lesson that maybe many investors will start to understand, because when there is no human life or when there's a threat to existence, I think that can impact every industry. So you can, if you are no longer there, then there is no point in having anything else around you. So I think that's the lesson that we've all learned, and I expect to see a lot more investments in this area following this as soon as things get to some sort of a normal.
So, Anu, in post-COVID world, which kind of startups you think are going to be more relevant? Which kind of ideas are going to be more relevant? From a biotech angle, maybe from genomic angle also.
So I think certainly we will start seeing that there will be a lot more emphasis on homemade devices, diagnostics, as well as manufacturing, of these reagents in-house. And that will happen for sure across the globe, because you can't expect that there can only be one or two suppliers globally and that they can supply, because when the supply chains were cut off, I think that is one. So those are the more practical level solutions that we will see. The other areas where we'll see are those where we can analyze a lot of data and build those platforms that will help in one, predicting what kind of a response we need to build. Second is to be able to build decision-making systems for the future, right? So in some ways, trying to build platforms that will enable us to manage any of, whether it's a crisis or whether it's actually coming up with a new discovery, that would be one. And the third kind of things would be where you can ultimately use a lot of AI or machine learning to analyze the data that is already out there. Because in the end, I think that will help us in coming up with much more nimbler solutions. So building the platforms is one. Quick response to the current crisis would be another. And the third would be where I think one area that is still fairly ignored is where we have actually enabled our scientists to be able to think and build something through their true passion. And I think if we can enable that, I think that would be another area that where we can actually truly see whether it's a Nobel Prize-like idea or otherwise. But I think that's a harder thing to see in the short term, but it's something that we can all aspire to.
So, Anu, in 2000, you started Osmium Biosciences, and at that time, there were no many players in this area. And now you are into personalized genome space. What makes you think that India is ready for personalized genome technology?
So we started BackMyGenome primarily as a extension of what we were doing in Osmium. So in Osmium, we were working with a lot of large pharmaceutical companies. And one of the big challenges that we faced at that time was that when you look at where the industry is heading, towards personalized medicine, right? So you're saying that for each person, there will be, your drugs are personalized, everything is personalized. Now that depends on a lot of data that you collect. And one of the big challenges, of course, was that there was very skewed data collections for different populations. So Indian population is a very large population, but while we comprise almost 20%, the data was like 0.2%, which means that most of us are not going to be able to truly get the benefit of personalized medicine. So I think that was the driving force for us to get this started. And we've been able to do that, by creating products like Genome Patri, which we basically use the wordplay on Janam Patri, because we wanted the Indian consumer to understand. And that served two purposes. I think one purpose was that we could help people in the whole process of prevention, But the second is also that ultimately you're building data that will ultimately be helpful from a personalized medicine perspective. So that's the main objective of what we are doing. Now, one of the things, like I was mentioning earlier, was that we're seeing that with the COVID crisis and others, we're starting to see that people are only now starting to understand what we were doing, by helping people say that, in the future, if something happens, you need to make sure that you can build on, preventing disease. You can make sure that you can, make sure that you take these nutrients, that you exercise and all of that. And I think now people are starting to understand why that really matters, because if you are a smoker or otherwise, you're more susceptible. So the whole concept of susceptibility is something that people have started to understand. But over the next few years, I think 2-3 things what we are anticipating to do is to be able to say, how do we connect that with what we are seeing today, both in terms of COVID, but also to be able to make it much more easily accessible to the average consumer, whether it is by using an app or otherwise, and add elements that will help them in that journey. So that is one part for the consumer. The second, obviously, will be to be able to analyze the data that we get. We have a very strong team of bioinformaticians and machine learning people. So the hope is to be able to use that data and ultimately be able to find some insights that are truly valuable for us.
So Anu, you were awarded Young Leader Award by World Economic Forum. You are part of multiple other forums and must be certainly having multiple meetings within these forums during this COVID crisis. So what is the internal feeling or internal sense within these meetings?
So I would say that, there's different levels of optimism and pessimism in these meetings, right? I think we are all starting to understand constraints by different parts of the ecosystem, right? So if, for instance, I think a lot of these groups that we are creating, task forces or otherwise, I think we're getting members from all different parts of the ecosystem, people who are, from the government, people who are from academia, from businesses and otherwise. And I think the nature of the collaboration is very productive, right? Because everybody has one enemy right now, and that is COVID. And therefore, I think it has been a very great experience, because you are now starting to say, how do you actually solve these problems? But at the same time, I think there is also a level of pessimism that you can see in some of these building up, because sometimes the incentives for different parts might be different, right? And I think that's where we need to make sure that, there will be some parts of the ecosystem that will say, yes, everyone knows that we need to build more, test kits, we need to build, PPEs, we need to build ventilators, all of that. I think that's an easy part. The second part is saying, how do you implement something? And how do you make that balance, right? Because you have people who are obviously, there are other parts of it than just saying that we need to control this crisis, right? Because the crisis is not just about a disease, it's about humanity, it's about people. And I think that's where it's very interesting that from the narrow view that we all come from in some form, because we might think we have a whole world's view, but what these task forces teach us is that there are many other views that maybe you never thought of as being that important, right? So for instance, if I'm a business person, I'm more interested in seeing that my company is up and running, that, for some reason that I can be able to do what I need to do. But from a government's perspective, there's a different element of expectation that comes up for, what needs to be done. And similarly, I think somebody who's looking at it from an NGO perspective, somebody who's looking at it from a laborer's perspective, or somebody who's looking at it from other perspectives, sometimes those might be at conflicting, angles. And I think what is interesting is that ultimately we all see that in most of these cases, the innovations are all that we all agree on. But the other parts, I think implementation, I think depends a lot on policy. And I think we are also seeing a very nimble response to policy as well. So I think there is good and there is bad, but I think that's part of it. And I think what I feel as a person that I've learned from this is that if India needs to build a strong ecosystem, I think we need to change a few things the way that we do. And it is the first-hand experience. I think our learning has been tremendously accelerated over the last few days. But I think we can offer our perspectives and maybe build much better systems, cleaner systems, more transparent systems, and that will enable us to build platforms that can allow us to quickly respond to anything that comes in. So I'd like to say that, when you look at, I've been reading a lot about the immune system, and one of the things that you find is that, we've all been very quick at responding. The first response is like, let's solve the problems. We need to solve the problem of PPE. We need to solve this and that. And I think that's a lot like our innate system, because it's it is there in us, and we need to make sure that we need to get this enemy out, and therefore we are able to come up with very quick solutions. But if you think about how it impacts from an overall bigger point of view, we need to be able to say, do you have the memory? And the memory comes only when you build systems in some form. And we need to make sure that we have an adaptive system that will allow us to be able to solve these problems in a much more streamlined fashion, right? So for instance, when we see countries like South Korea or Singapore or others, I think they've learned, obviously they have been burnt before, but they've been able to use that experience and be able to respond to it in a very beautiful fashion. And I think that's what we need to learn and build. So clearly we have a lot of people who can do a lot of jugaad, but I think it's important that we need to not just be a country that can do that quick innovation, but we need to be able to be a country that can build sustained innovation, and innovation that can continue and can be implemented on a way that will allow us to be successful.
So Anu, let's close down on this very positive note. I genuinely hope that students will understand the importance of innovation, which you have highlighted. So thanks for joining us and thanks for sparing time. We sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Adil.